today I am not going to deliver a lecture as such. I am going to narrate a story. This is the story of how in Maharashtra we managed medical oxygen supply during the second wave of pandemic. And this is a story of heroic effort put in by many of my colleagues and our team, and we made sure that liquid medical oxygen is available in every part of the state during those crucial months. So let's first look at the setting in which the second wave came actually. So this was the this was March 2020, 24th March 2020, and on that day a lockdown was declared. We all thought that lockdown is a good solution to the threat of the spread of epidemic. Little did we realize that because of lockdown, a large number of people who were marginal sections of the society, who were mostly laboring class, they would have nowhere to go, and they set out walking towards their homes. It was an unexpected problem for all of us, for the administration, because these people started walking. Now this is the sketch of Mumbai, but they started walking from all major cities and started walking towards their homes in UP, Bihar, Orissa, Andhra Pradesh. From wherever they had come, they started walking. And it became a new problem for us, because you can't just have so many people walking without food, without shelter, without a place to stay. So all our energies went into making arrangements for them all the way up to the borders of Maharashtra. So on the highway to Nashik or beyond, on the highways, connecting Vidarbha area to Chhattisgarh and all, we had to make lot of arrangements. This became an iconic image of that migration. This is actually a video was there. This toddler is extremely tired, and his mother still wants to relentlessly walk back to her home, and she has no way to make this kid to sleep or relax, and she puts him on that wheeled bag. The kid sleeps like this, and the mother keeps on pulling the bag and the kid along. This was very heart-touching moment during the course of those massive migrations that were going on. Then we had this problem. This was WhatsApp. With WhatsApp groups, everybody is member of so many WhatsApp groups, but WhatsApp became a problem because WhatsApp was spreading all sorts of misinformation, disinformation, quack therapies, and various other suspicion between one community and another. What WhatsApp was doing was a major challenge. To counter disinformation and misinformation was a major challenge, and we had to work on that. Politicians also were busy. They were trying to divide people. As you can see, the symbols clearly tell you what they were trying to do. But community to community, they were trying to distance them mentally, emotionally from each other. And while we were managing various aspects of COVID administration, we still had this additional problem of managing communal tensions. These things were these stymied our efforts time and again. And this is, I found this cartoon to be apt for an economics institute, because these are poor people going. They think that trickle-down economics should work for them. We all talk of trickle-down economics, but for them trickle-down economics never worked. Instead, they were victims of biology, that is the onslaught of virus on their lives. So all of these poor people were very adversely affected, and this is the kind of setting. Whole of 2020 we had this kind of situation developing in our state, in the country, and in this background the second wave of COVID came, and we had the problem of oxygen, liquid oxygen. What happened? Because of the pandemic, very unusual thing happened. We can call it a force majeure event. You know what is a force majeure event? It's a legal term which describes act of God, something beyond anybody's control. So the entire oxygen system, production, distribution, supply, everything got adversely affected because of this force majeure event. It was a market failure situation because manufacturers had contracts with industries, they had contracts with medical institutions, and yet they could not fulfill this. They didn't have people to run their plants also. A very unusual thing about pandemic is about what happens to demand and supply, and that I will show you with facts and figures. The funny thing is that in a pandemic, demand rises sharply, very sharply, of some product. Say I have faced many, I have managed many disaster situations. So I give an example. When Latur earthquake happened, so many houses were destroyed. One of the things suddenly very greatly in demand in Latur was all the plaster material and those iron, the steel bars or whatever it is called, for surgery, orthopedic surgery. Suddenly there was high demand for that in that particular area. So each disaster brings some situation, some product which is an extremely high demand. At the same time, the situation arising from that disaster impairs your ability to reach that product where the demand is. So we are in total fix, catch-22 situation. You have to work in a very difficult environment. That was the difficult environment in which we worked. We realized that oxygen supply is not possible in the business as usual manner, and so we were compelled right in the beginning of the second wave. We knew, I'll tell you later, we were compelled for a complete takeover of the supply chain, complete takeover from production to its delivery in the hospitals. We took over that complete supply chain. We meaning we the bureaucrats. I was chief secretary, I headed a committee, I had some other IAS officers from health department, from food and drug administration. None of us had ever had any knowledge about how to run this supply chain of oxygen. But in the circumstance, we were required to take over that entire supply chain, and we were given a mandate by the then Chief Minister to make sure that we reach oxygen to every hospital, every patient, in such a way that no one dies because of shortage of oxygen. So, how do we go about it? What conceptual tools did we rely upon? So, first of all, there are these disaster management policies. These policies are established since 2005. Earlier, there was a gap in this policy. There was no policy. But in 2005, Disaster Management Act was passed by Parliament. It's a national act. And this act gives various provisions. We have some overriding powers on any aspect of disaster management. And as Chief Secretary, I was heading the executive committee of the State Disaster Management Authority, and I had full powers to deal with various exigencies of this situation. Then we had the National Disaster Management Policy of 2009. Things evolved over a period of time. Then, let me see from here. National Disaster Management Plan was there, PM's 10-point agenda, and various SOPs. So these were the documents that helped us to see how we can deal with this disaster. Yeah, that's fine. Then this was a new concept for us, supply chain management. So we consulted some experts in the field to tell us how to deal with supply chain management. So they told us that supply chain management is basically looking at the entire chain from production to the end consumer as if it is a one living organism, one entity which is operating in sort of concert with each other. It involves process of planning, implementation, controlling of various operations to achieve client satisfaction, and includes movement, storage, work in process inventory, and finished goods. So we familiarized ourselves with concepts of supply chain management. Very important was to know the concepts of logistics. As they say in logistics, the experts told us that you have these 7 R's of logistics. That is right product. You have to get the right product. You have to get it in right quantity, in the right condition, at the right place, at the right time, to the right customer, and at the right price. So this was the challenge, to get liquid medical oxygen produced in the plants and delivered to all the hospitals where the demand was very high. So now let's see how we went about it. And this is the story that I was saying. I'll be telling you the story. So this is the situation. Before we started, we sort of delved into what is the normal situation of oxygen, how this market operates, because we had earlier never dealt with this oxygen market. So we got into this, how does this market operate. So we found out that within Maharashtra, our own state, we have 10 producers of liquid oxygen. Not a small number, good number of producers. They are, I have not listed everybody, just example is JSW, Linde and Inox. What was the daily production capacity? The daily production capacity was 1250 to 1300 metric tons. That is the installed capacity. If all plants run to the best of ability, then they will produce this much oxygen. But what happens is, in normal course, everybody does not run his plant to the full capacity. Something is kept down for maintenance and things like that. So actual production roughly happens 1200 metric tons per day. 1200 to 1300, but roughly 1200 metric ton we could safely assume that this is the production we get every day. In normal course, as per the contracts that these producers have with industries and medical establishments, out of 1200, the distribution is roughly 1000 metric tons are used by the industry and 200 metric tons are used by hospitals. This is for all operative procedures and whatever requirement is there of hospitals. So you have 1000 metric ton for industry, 200 metric ton for hospitals, that is for health purposes, and that is where it's an equilibrium sort of situation in the market. Things go on day to day like this: 1000 for industry, 200 for health. Now you see what this second wave of LMO, second wave of COVID did. It made a huge difference to the way oxygen demand for health purposes takes place. So right in the beginning of the second wave, we had some data, we had some good consultants who were modeling things for us, and they projected that during the second wave, at any given point of time, we will have total almost 800,000 cases who are COVID positive and in various stages of treatment. Some may have mild symptoms, some may have severe symptoms, but 800,000 patients at any given time in our state, quite a sizable number. The doctors, pulmonologists and people who are experts in lung diseases and all, they told us that second wave has one unique feature, that is the virus is engaging deeply with the lungs, not just here, throat and this portion, they engage deeply with the lungs. And so they told us that you should expect almost 10 to 12% of these people requiring oxygen support, 10 to 12% of this huge number requiring oxygen support. So we sort of determined with the help of these models that we will see almost 80,000 people, 80,000 patients who would be required to be put on oxygen support on any given day during that second wave of the pandemic. So we asked our doctors how much oxygen will be required, and they said, from their own experience, they said that average oxygen per patient per day would be 20 kgs. So if you put a patient for 24 hours on the oxygen mask, and with such condition of the lungs, he or she will require 20 kgs on an average. But they also said there are patients who are better off, who will manage with 7 or 8 kgs. There are patients who would be slightly worse off, they will require 30 kgs almost oxygen per day. So this meant that it will be 20 metric tons of oxygen for 1000 patients, and overall our requirement only to support COVID patients on oxygen became 1600 metric ton per day. 1600 metric ton. Remember, in the earlier slide I said our maximum capacity in the state was 1200 metric tons. In normal course we were providing only 200 metric tons to healthcare system. From 200 we were required to arrange 1600 metric ton for healthcare system alone. This is a huge challenge, 8 times increase in demand. You imagine if India required 8 times more food for whatever reason, it won't happen, but suppose, where will we bring so much food? So that kind of increase in demand, very phenomenal increase in demand, was confronting us. The other thing was more worrying, because when you make model statistical analysis and all, they give what is most likely, then we also ask what is the worst case scenario, because we have to be prepared for worst case scenarios as well. So worst case scenario, was very worrying. They said, the model and consultants and experts, they told us that worst case scenario, you will have 1 million people who will be COVID positive, and 10% of them, that is 100,000 people, will require oxygen support. If 20 kg per day is the requirement, 2000 metric ton per day will be the required oxygen support for in the worst case scenario. Our hearts sank after seeing these figures. Luckily, during the entire pandemic, we never reached that worst case scenario, and the most likely scenario was what finally we settled at. So, as I said, our liquid medical oxygen demand increased from 200 metric ton to 1600 metric ton, almost 8 times increase. So how did we deal with it? The first very tough decision was that we tell the industry that we will not give you even 1 drop of liquid oxygen. Just we are diverting everything. So whatever processes, industrial processes that were dependent upon these 1000 metric ton of oxygen, that had to be stopped by those industries. One thing I want to clarify is, you would be wondering how we can just stop industrial oxygen and convert it to medical oxygen. The point is that both the processes are similar, and it is quite fungible. Industrial oxygen is less pure, medical oxygen is more pure. There are standards given for that. So we can tell the manufacturers that you raise your purity level to this level and give, so that becomes a liquid medical oxygen. So because of fungible process, we could easily convert what was being produced for industry to medical. So even with diverting every drop of liquid oxygen to medical use and for COVID patients, we still had 400 metric ton per day gap. That is, we did not have it in our state, we had to bring it from other states. So we worked on various supply side interventions. The first was that we got our 10 producers who are regularly producing oxygen. We told them, no industrial oxygen, just produce liquid medical oxygen for us. Tweak your process, make sure that you produce more pure oxygen. Then we told them production at full capacity. We helped them to get labor and whatever support they wanted. Full capacity, no maintenance breaks and things like that. Then we had some plants that were coming up that would have taken some time to commission, so we forced them to do it early. This is that Dolvi plant in Raigad, where 80 metric ton capacity got added because we started early commissioning. Luckily, we had some 36 dormant air supply separator units. So these were dormant because they were not they felt they were not very financially viable. So they were not producing anything. We got them also to produce. They don't produce much, but every drop mattered. So we got a total of 125 to 100 metric ton of the 400, 500 metric ton gap from these sources. But then still we had to get lot of liquid oxygen, medical oxygen from outside states. So here what happens is many steel plants and petroleum refinery plants, they have their own oxygen producing units. So we identified what were the closest to us. We found that Bhilai steel plant is close to Vidarbha region. So with the help of Government of India, we tied up that much quantity of oxygen to come from Bhilai into Vidarbha region. Then Jamnagar, Reliance refinery is there, and they have a oxygen producing plant. So we contacted Reliance, and they agreed to give us oxygen, and we tagged it to Mumbai and North and Western Maharashtra region. And Bellary in Karnataka, that was JSW steel plant is there. They produce good quantity of oxygen. So we tied it up for supply to southern Maharashtra. This happened right in the beginning of the second wave. All this tying up was done. And in case this was not sufficient, we looked at distant sources. So we identified two. One was at Vizag and another steel plant at Angul, far away. Then our other challenge was how to get all this oxygen. We'll bring from other states. We have one of the problem in Maharashtra was all our oxygen producing units are located in the west. So transporting so much oxygen to eastern part of the state, Vidarbha, Marathwada, that was a challenge. We found that we had 195 LMO tankers with a carrying capacity of about 2500 metric tons. That was not adequate. So how to get more tankers? We did the search, talked to people, experts. They said there are some chemicals that cannot be converted to liquid medical oxygen because those chemicals and their whatever pollutants or poisonous effect can get carried into oxygen. So only nitrogen and argon gases are such that those tankers that are used for nitrogen and argon gases, that can be washed and converted to liquid oxygen. So we found 72 tankers and we converted them to liquid oxygen. So armed with 247 LMO tankers, we had a good capacity to transport oxygen within the state. Now transporting oxygen was not that simple. It is not as if you just put oxygen in the tanker and let it go. We needed tracking mechanism because oxygen shortage was compelling people to behave in very unpredictable ways. They would come and stop the oxygen tanker going to a certain destination and say, "Udhar nahi, idhar chalo, come this way." And that would, if we allowed it, it would have disrupted the whole thing. So we had to establish a tracking system with some devices on each tanker. And even then we found that our biggest problem was that lot of these tankers took long time to go empty. They have to go empty one way. Only the other way they can come filled. So empty travel time we found was a big wastage, and we had to somehow deal with the empty travel time. So we also consulted with All India Industrial Gas Manufacturers Association to give us more tankers and facilitate our tanker movement smoothly. So we got good cooperation from AIIGMA. We then thought that the better way to transport oxygen for over long distances is to go multimodal. That is, we use railways to transport oxygen, not just liquid, not just tankers being driven by drivers on the roads, which is a bit inefficient. So we got multimodal transport. We took the help of railways, and this is how our tankers would mount onto railway wagons. The railway wagons would carry them empty to whatever destination, Vizag or Angul or whichever place oxygen was available, fill them up and bring them back like this. They would come to various locations in Maharashtra depending on whatever plan we had put in place. So this is, media started calling it Oxygen Express. So this was one such Oxygen Express which came to a location in Solapur. So number of such sorties of so-called Oxygen Express started during the second wave. Even then we were not satisfied with the efficiency of tanker use, and to further help us in making this whole thing more efficient, we thought let's explore whether we can do something with air transport. And so we contacted Air Force. My batchmate was Defense Secretary at that time. I spoke to him, he connected me to somebody in the Indian Air Force, and we had a long technical discussion. So they told us that look, we cannot carry filled tanker because a filled tanker is highly pressurized and oxygen is flammable. So we can't airlift filled tanker for you, but we can help you carry empty tankers to filling destinations. So we said, okay, that helps. See, from Pune we ran sorties to Jamnagar, Pune Air Force Base. They gave us transport aircrafts and we ran sorties to Jamnagar. So going to Jamnagar was, by these aircrafts, was just 1.5 hours. If it had gone by road, it would have taken 14 to 15 hours. Instead, we got aeroplanes that would take the tankers to Jamnagar and it would go there in 1.5 hours. So this is how that big transport plane, I don't know what is its exact name, but these oxygen tankers were loaded onto these Air Force planes. They would fly from Pune to Jamnagar in an hour and a half kind of flying time. They would unload the tankers there. Tankers would go to the Reliance facility and fill up and then come either by train or by road. Same thing, they would run sorties from Nagpur to Angul or Vizag, and similar tankers would go there and come back by train or by road. Then apart from improving the transport of oxygen, requisite quantity of oxygen, we found that many hospitals do not have adequate storage capacity. Why they don't have? If you remember what I told, in normal course they deal with 200 metric tons of oxygen per day. Normal medical activities like that. So here they had to deal with 8 times more quantity, and so we thought that we need to install more storage facilities in hospitals. And so for that, these kind of tanks we procured, liquid oxygen, that is, these were installed in many hospitals, additional capacity. And those are the PSA plants on the right hand side. These plants are those that can generate oxygen there itself. From the ambient air, they can compress it in these machines and generate some quantity of oxygen, just as a backup support to each hospital. And we mobilized all the possible tankers, from welders, from any other use where these tankers are put. We mobilized everything and deployed for COVID patients. At the same time, we looked at the demand side interventions. So first was curtailing oxygen supply to industry. We told them that we cannot give you anything. It had a huge cost, by the way. Many processes had to be stopped. Then we did statewide inspection of all installations in hospitals. We realized that hospitals were negligent in some ways. Oxygen is a odorless, colorless gas. Even if it is leaking from a pipeline in the ICU or wherever, nobody will notice it. But at that time, it was very important to save every drop of oxygen. We got everything inspected and we fixed all the leakages, saving very valuable oxygen for us. We also found that many doctors, pulmonologists in remote parts of the state, they were not very confident of what quantity of oxygen to administer. So they were administering very heavy quantities, 30 kgs per day, 40 kgs per day, like that. I don't know how much it was helping, but so we consulted experts in Mumbai, and those doctors, they were all pulmonologists. So they told us what is sort of a guideline, how much oxygen to be administered to patients who are showing different types of symptoms. So to do all this, as I said, we had a coordinating and monitoring mechanism. There was an empowered committee under my chairmanship. I was chief secretary then, and we had number of officers with us. Empowered committee means you are students of public policy also, that our committee had full powers to take decision on the matter. We did not have to go to any minister or did not have to go to cabinet. Only thing was, every week Maharashtra cabinet met every Wednesday, and our job was to tell them what we have done in the preceding week, update them on whatever steps we are taking, but we had full powers. So we would take daily review and monitor each and every tanker, each and every production capacity, how much oxygen was produced, how it was transported, to whom it has reached, whether it has reached in time. And sometimes it happened that it was some local emergency, that one night it happened that a tanker was going to some destination, and Jalgaon reported that they are suddenly facing acute shortage of oxygen. So we diverted that tanker to Jalgaon and made arrangement for another district, a separate arrangement. So it was not as if it was lot of touch and go moments were there, when we thought that because of some mishap in in getting oxygen in timely manner, some mishap can happen. It happened one day in Mumbai itself, that we were getting tankers from Jamnagar for supplying to Mumbai, and the tanker got delayed. Something, I think its tire burst or something happened. It got delayed, and one hospital with 150 beds, it was supposed to supply there, and we found that its supply is dwindling. So at night, I was awake at night, the municipal commissioner was awake, and we shifted all these patients from that hospital where the oxygen stock was going down. Almost 100 odd patients we shifted to another hospital where sufficient quantity of oxygen was there. So these kind of things used to happen, but we ensured that no one sort of suffered due to lack of oxygen anywhere. So our efforts came to be recognized, and media got interested to see how we are managing things. So we told them we have a bunch of officers who are tracking things every day, minute to minute, and decisions are taken. So we got this report. OT team is backbone of uninterrupted supply in the state. However, we were in full command of the entire supply chain, and oxygen was getting procured from distant sources and getting delivered to all health facilities properly, with of course some some moments of tension here and there, but by and large we got oxygen everywhere. But then by this time, situation in North India wasn't really that good. If you remember, Delhi, Uttar Pradesh, Haryana to some extent, those parts of the state, Delhi was particularly very badly hit. So they didn't have oxygen at all. Few minutes of oxygen in big hospitals of Delhi. There were few minutes of oxygen left. The deans of those hospitals were absolutely in tears. They didn't know when next oxygen is coming. Basic reason was that they probably could not anticipate this gravity of the situation, which our experts told us in time, and they landed in this situation. This is a news item. Delhi hospitals plead, just bring us oxygen, and they put out, many hospitals put out these kind of boards in view of oxygen scarcity and uncertainty. We are not admitting people. Then some hospitals even reduced their number of beds. Even AIMS reduced its number of beds. And then we had the situation that patients are going from one hospital to another, and they are not getting admission. In fact, one foreign service officer, a secretary level officer who retired in the Ministry of External Affairs, he unfortunately was affected by this second wave COVID. He went from place to place, did not get admission, finally landed in Medanta Hospital somewhere in the near Delhi, and there also there was problem of getting admission. His car was parked in the parking lot, and he died there gasping for breath. It was very unfortunate. So many of our colleagues died due to this kind of situation. I was Chief Secretary Maharashtra. My batchmate who was Chief Secretary in Bihar, he also died while in chair. While in chair meaning while he was holding that position. He suffered COVID second wave, he had some comorbidities, and he died. Very tragic was the Secretary in Government of India, Mr. Guru Mahapatra. He was the one who was assisting us in dealing with all this oxygen supply. And we were interacting very frequently on phone, on WhatsApp and others, and suddenly I heard he is not well. I asked him what happened. He says, COVID ho gaya, but I am taking medicines. And he directed me to talk to Additional Secretary in the Ministry for further cooperation. And 15 days later, I hear that he is no more. It was so sad. 86 batch officer. He was from Gujarat cadre. I think probably the Prime Minister knew him well because he was Chief Minister of Gujarat before becoming PM. So even PM tweeted about his death, and he felt sorry about it. So that was so a person who is so closely known to the Prime Minister, who is holding position of Secretary in Government of India, also could not survive due to this problem in Delhi. So obviously the comparison started, how things are there and how things are here. So first appreciation we got from Supreme Court. Supreme Court took up a suo motu petition, and then after the hearing and all, it said that Supreme Court lauds Mumbai model of oxygen management, says Center and Delhi can learn from it. So this was a sort of a court commending our work. The Honorable Prime Minister also spoke. This is again May 2021. All India Radio has reported by a tweet that Prime Minister spoke to Chief Minister Uddhav Thackeray. The Prime Minister says Maharashtra is fighting a good battle against COVID. So this was appreciation from the Prime Minister. Then we had some big names from private sector also noticing that the way we had managed things here were much better than the chaos that was prevailing in Delhi and some northern states. So this is Kiran Mujumdar Shaw, who said, I just studied the Maharashtra and BMC model of COVID management and super impressed with its uniquely thought out processes. Then this is from the film industry, Mr. Javed Akhtar. This is again May 2021. By then we were in full control of the entire supply chain and things were moving smoothly. So he also wrote that I believe others need to learn a lesson or two from the government of Maharashtra, and they are fighting with the menace of COVID with tremendous competence. I mean, these are the kind of appreciation that fills your heart, with satisfaction that okay, we are on the right track. This is Amitabh Kant. He had probably come to see the oxygen storage facility of Mumbai Corporation, and he sort of commended them for the timely action on this front. So why we succeeded? This is where the lessons are important. The first point is data integrity was maintained. This is very important. Some of you are public policy students. We discussed this morning about importance of data also. We were told by our government, our Chief Minister, that there is going to be no suppression and no fudging of data. We will report faithfully whatever is going on. And we did that, and we had good, robust data right from day one of COVID. Because of that data, and of course we had good consultants, Even TIFR came to our help, Tata Institute of Fundamental Research. Some faculty members there came and helped us in modeling the behavior of the virus for the second wave. So because the data was good and these consultants gave us good statistical models, so we could make correct predictions. As I told you, our model said that we will have 800,000 people as COVID positive and 80,000 on oxygen support. We reached that 80,000 on at the peak for 2-3 days. Other times it was below 80,000, about 75, 76, 78,000. So the correct prediction helped. We knew how much oxygen is going to be required, and we tied up everything in advance and also tied up all the transportation arrangements. So good data is very important. Good statistical models which can make proper predictions is very important. Then we were lucky to have very good experts. Mumbai has lot of, the medical scene in Mumbai is very good. You have experts in all the fields. So we had pulmonologists and various other experts who gave us timely advice. We got very good, timely and accurate prediction of oxygen demand, how much will be required. And because we got all this advice in a timely manner with proper reliable data and good modeling, probably we were lucky that we got good statistical models to work on. So we could tie up various components of supply within the state, outside the state, as also, tankers, railways, air force, everything was tied up. But I am just listing out some of the challenges, because the whole idea of narrating this story is that eventually we should learn. Pandemics can come again, nobody can tell you. This time pandemic came after 100 years. The earlier pandemic was Spanish flu. It came after 100 years. We don't know, it will come 15 years later, 5 years later. So we should know how we managed it. So our challenge was that entire supply chain was put under our government control in a way. We never knew how to run a supply chain of oxygen. We never knew also how oxygen is produced. So we went and saw how it is produced, what is the difference between industrial oxygen and medical oxygen. Lot of learning was there. We had to learn very quickly. Transportation proved a challenge, as I told you, that not that the number, we had adequate number of tankers, they could move well, but we had this vulnerability of hijack. So we required police, going with these tankers all the time to ensure that nobody stops these tankers midway. Then there was a limiting issue of tanker drivers. We realized we didn't know in the beginning. We thought any truck driver could be put to drive a oxygen cryogenic tanker, but that is not the case. The regulation requires that it should be a specifically trained driver for driving cryogenic tankers. So we found it somewhat limiting factor. Then this was political motivations, parochial instincts and other extraneous considerations. Again, they came in the way of moving tankers from one place to another. As we had a long sort of 2-hour battle in Kolhapur, when there's a production facility in Kolhapur. Goa was running short of oxygen, so we decided to send a tanker from Kolhapur to Goa. And when the local minister got to know about it, he came in front of the tanker. He stood like this. He said, "I won't let you take this tanker to Goa. Why are you giving it to them? We need oxygen here." And we had made the assessment. The oxygen in Kolhapur was of adequate quantity. But it took a lot of effort to persuade him. Finally, I said that if people in Goa die, do you think you can have a comfortable sleep? Then he said, "Nahi, wo to nahi hoga." I said, "Let them go, we'll organize. There will be no oxygen shortage in Kolhapur, you don't worry." So these are the kind of things that we had to deal with. The point is that these parochial instincts I have found in this COVID, these parochial instincts just came up. So if there is a production facility of remdesivir in some state, say state A it is located, and you are allotted that quantity or you have contracted with that entity to supply remdesivir to you in Maharashtra, the local people won't let it come out of there. They will try to keep it there, hoard it there, keep it for their own state. These kind of tendencies were visible, and which is, I thought it's a challenge, it's not good for a country of our size. And then of course coordination, frequent coordination was required. So these are some of the learnings. Now what are the future challenges? So future challenge, what I found is that as I mentioned, pandemics can come again. If not pandemics, any other cataclysmic event can happen. I realized that in all these years of disaster management, we have handled with so many types of disasters, but we have seriously not mapped all the supply chains. What product comes from where. At least, things like essential things that are required in any disaster situation, like food, like water, medicine. One can make list of things that are required, just very basic. And what is the supply chain in any given location? Suppose something happens in Mumbai. What is the supply chain? From where does the food come? From where do vegetables come? From where do medicines come? So once we map all these things, we should identify the vulnerabilities and plug those deficiencies in advance as a part of disaster management. Then being prepared for massive disruptions, as we saw here, that from 200 metric ton to 1600 metric ton. It's a massive increase in demand for one single product. We should be prepared for such kind of increases. And so that is how study each supply chain and make sure that each supply chain is resilient, its weak points are identified and plugged. That is the sort of learning from this experience, and I hope I have advised government also on this, and I am sure they must be working on studying these various supply chains. Now I conclude my talk with this concern that while I was preparing for this talk, we also read various news items of what is happening in Nanded hospital, in Chhatrapati Sambhajinagar, in Nagpur and all. These hospitals, number of deaths are happening of babies, neonatals and others. Suddenly they say there's shortage of medicine, there's shortage of nurses or doctors. What my concern is, and I am teaching public policy also, yesterday only I spoke of this subject, that there is something called policy window. Policy window. That is, when you make policy, it is not as if every policy can be made every time. Some circumstances create a window when you can push policies very easily. So like I gave example yesterday, 1991, when Indian economy was in absolute doldrums, Dr. Manmohan Singh was finance minister, he got that policy window to totally change the policy regime. Liberalization, new industrial policy, capital account convertibility, so many things he introduced in that policy window opened by a crisis in 1991. I was giving another example that there's a anti-superstition bill, a law. It was going on for 10 years, all these various things like human sacrifice, black magic, this, that. So to stop all these things, we wanted, these activists wanted law to be passed. They were working on it for over a decade and nothing was happening. I used to attend so many meetings. One day, very unfortunate incident happened. Dr. Narendra Dabolkar was murdered in Pune. He was the main activist who was canvassing for this bill to be passed. He used to attend so many meetings. While he was alive, this bill was always going up and down between different levels of government. After his death, within 7 days, the then governor signed the ordinance, and the next assembly session it was passed as a bill. So that law is in place now. So again, it's a policy window. A window opens in some crisis, and you get a chance to make that policy. My concern here is that we all thought that COVID had exposed many weaknesses of our health system. While we were managing COVID on a day-to-day basis, we realized, okay, this is the problem in urban health, this is the problem in rural health. These are the areas where remote areas where hospitals are not available. These are the areas where the staff is not there. These are areas far away. We need to plug these gaps. It was felt at that time, understood, and everyone made very nahi, abhi we'll just let this get over and we'll get on with improving the healthcare system. So I thought that just like 1991 or this Dabolkar incident, we have a policy window opening for us, which gives us an opportunity to make the healthcare, to transform the healthcare system in our state or in the country. But unfortunately, with these reports coming from Nanded and other places, I am beginning to have a doubt whether we really took this policy window seriously and have we worked on it. I am not fully conversant. I am giving a disclaimer that I am not fully conversant with all the things that happened in Nanded and Chhatrapati Sambhaji Nagar and Nagpur. But I am beginning to suspect that we lost the policy window that was available to us. So if we have lost that policy window, I think again we must bring, the government must bring all that energy back, remember the lessons of COVID-19 and set out to reform the healthcare system. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. The insights from the entire COVID scenario through which I think most of us have passed, ones who must have got COVID and ones who experienced it through their family members related. We could definitely relate to ourselves, but at the administrative level, right now we could understand the gravity of the entire crisis. Now I open the session for a question answer round.
Good evening, sir. I'm a first year student from BSc Economics, Gokhale Institute. And my question is, during COVID, because of the price hike, because of the demand supply mismatch, how do you manage the black marketing of the oxygen cylinders which was there in the market and the price hikes? And was it there in Maharashtra? And if it was, how did you deal with the issue of black marketing?
Yeah. चालू है. So first of all, about the pricing of oxygen, there was a lot of shortage, so pricing of oxygen was an issue. We were getting from all sorts of sources, and so how to determine the price? There was no benchmark for it. So what we did was that we requested the National Pharmaceutical Pricing Authority. It is a statutory authority constituted under a special law. That authority has all the powers to determine prices of all medical and everything. In this situation, in the COVID situation, everything was selling at an exorbitant price, be it oxygen, be it remdesivir, tocilizumab or any other medicine. So we requested NPPA to fix the prices for all these things. So we got all prices from NPPA and we paid on the basis of that. The other bit is that we were supplying oxygen at NPPA approved price to all hospitals and all these people. This retail cylinder thing was not so much in vogue in Maharashtra because we had oxygen adequately supplied to all the hospitals. Probably some communities there was, they would take, instead of coming and getting admitted in hospital, in some communities they thought it's better to take the cylinder home and administer to the patient at home. So they were taking at prices not approved by NPPA. They may have been paying more price, but we did not receive any complaint. They were doing it voluntarily on their own. So they didn't want to, for whatever reason, they didn't want to bring patient to the hospital for giving oxygen.
The because in the second wave we heard a news from Delhi and the near regions from Gurgaon that there was a scam which was going
Yes.
about oxygen cylinders.
Yes.
And the question was that was the scam also there in Maharashtra and the near states?
No, because we had oxygen in adequate quantity in all the hospitals. So only those people who did not want to come to hospital and wanted to treat their patient at home by taking a cylinder to their home, those were only required to take those cylinders in some sort of open market. So it was not a very big issue. And there also what happened, uh, sort of unintended consequences type of thing. Oxygen has to be administered in a particular way. So even if you take a oxygen tank at home, what they did, instead of putting distilled water into that, it's a test tube kind of thing. So the oxygen comes from the cylinder there and then it is inhaled. Instead of distilled water, they put some local water in that. And we had the other crisis of a disease called mucormycosis. That was because these people were inhaling not so pure oxygen which was routed through ordinary water. The nose cavities and all started getting fungal infection, and it is such a dangerous disease that this fungal infection from the nose cavity, it goes into eyes and even brain. So we were discouraging people that don't take cylinders home and put your patient on that kind of way. Get them to hospital because they will be under supervision. But still, as I told you, some people without our knowledge, without the knowledge of local administration, they did this.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, sir. My name is Arya. I'm a student from M5 BSc Economics. So my question was related to the privatization and the government sector of healthcare. So was there any lack of communication between the private sector and the government hospital from the bureaucrat side in, for example, cases of admitting more patients in the hospitals? And what was the response from private sector hospital? And if you agree to this, would privatization in the healthcare sector help the Maharashtra thereby?
So, as far as COVID patients were concerned, all the private hospitals were also, their oxygen beds were under the control of, control in a sense, they were being looked after by the local district collector and a nodal officer appointed there. So if it is Jalgaon district, we know that so many oxygen beds are there in government hospital, so many in private hospital, and we would provide oxygen to both government hospital and private hospital. So as I was saying, because we had sort of controlled everything as an integrated system under government control, private sector could not have functioned like this. That's what we felt at that time in the crisis situation. So that's how it worked. And even where private hospital where patients were admitted, their bills were paid under our Mahatma Jyotiba Phule scheme. So in effect, everything was by government only. That is, beds were given based on some sort of supervision, that actually deserving people are given beds. There was also a tendency in some places to reserve beds in advance. Somebody is in the early stages of COVID, he thinks कि maybe I'll require, keep it vacant for me. So all these things had to be stopped. So lot of government intervention was required even in private hospitals. But at the larger question of whether healthcare, totally privatized healthcare would be desirable is, I find it difficult to agree with that, because a state like Maharashtra, there are many areas where private sector will not go at all. Think of Gadchiroli, think of tribal areas, think of remote areas, private sector will not go at all. whatever private people are operating, they are mostly underqualified or pure quacks who are operating there. So, a good, proper healthcare system in those areas has to be provided by the government.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening, sir. Myself Shalini. I'm a MSc student. Sir, my doubt is my question is a broad question regarding the bureaucracy. Sir, we are getting very negative news regarding the civil servants nowadays, like corruption or political allegations, etc. So, since you are in the system since 1985, so how you feel that system has changed? And do you think that the earlier the civil servants had more freedom with respect to policy making than now?
No, it is difficult to say. Firstly, I will tell you is that civil service is also a reflection of society. So, if society in general is more into these shortcut ways of earning money, you will have some civil servants also doing that. So, that cannot be ruled out. And in any system, I think you can never have a totally pure system. That is, all 100% people there are all good. Such system does not exist. Even if you go to church, for example, you have many stories of priests doing all sorts of things. So, it is there. Nothing can be all that pure. Only thing I think we should have adequate systems to identify delinquents and punish them in time. That I think is there. We have Prevention of Corruption Act is there. Then this act operates in combination with PMLA Act, that is Enforcement Directorate, and CBI is there, Anti-Corruption Bureau is there. So it is not, there are mechanisms to deal with delinquencies. If things are proved, we can chuck them out of service. Things are there. Yeah.
Can I? Good evening, sir. I'm Neerja from first year. My question is the supply chains are usually mapped only during crisis mode. As we are very short-sighted when it comes to it, how do we ensure that our reforms and supply chains live longer and become resilient or transilient as you say?
Yeah, so that is my point that one of the learnings from this experience is that we need to pay attention to supply chains when things are normal, that is in the normal course, and prepare them for any disaster kind of situation. As I told you, in 2005 Disaster Management Act was passed. In that act we have all these authorities. There is a National Disaster Management Authority, there is a State Disaster Management Authority, there is a local authority here. Pune Commissioner would be heading the Disaster Management Authority. So we have these authorities and they regularly carry out exercises, carry out simulations, and even real time exercise, creating a simulated scene somewhere and seeing the response of agencies. So these things go on without you and I seeing it, common citizens seeing it. Lot of these things happen. So I am sure that with this experience and the need for supply chain management would be recognized by these authorities, and when they are doing preparatory exercises, when they are doing simulations, that time they will take this into account and hopefully try to make supply chains more resilient, or even this concept of transiliency as they are talking about. Resilience is only getting back to status quo ante, where the point from where there was a disturbance, you go back there. But some disasters or they are such that they transform the whole thing. So like pandemic transformed so many things in the way the world functions. So there I think you have to transform the supply chain as well as make it resilient. Now just one example, if we have to understand why we need to work on things like that. So if you see the supply of chips, the electronic chips and all these things, the 92% of these chips are manufactured in Taiwan. And there is a dispute going on Taiwan and China and all that. Sometimes you find videos of Chinese planes flying over there. What happened in Israel and Palestine, suddenly something triggered. It's almost like a war zone. God forbid something happens in Taiwan, our chip supply will be totally cut off. We will not have any chips to manufacture any of these things. No product which is of use can be manufactured without chips. Everything will stop. So we must recognize this fact. We must build some capability within the country so that in any eventuality we have something to fall back upon. Some alternative sources of supply could be identified. I don't know, but for each such crucial product we have to work on it. In during COVID, what we realized, we talked to many pharma companies. So when they make medicines, they require these APAs, active pharmaceutical APIs, active pharmaceutical ingredients. So they mix up those ingredients and then we get these various medicines. Much of that API, that is the raw material for pharmaceutical, comes from China. It used to come from China at that time. And we were not sure that possibly it could happen because China was itself reeling under COVID, that if their production facilities are adversely affected, we will not get APIs and we will not be able to produce medicines here. So Government of India tried to fast track pharmaceutical park kind of policy. That is, you have a huge sort of MIDC, industrial estate, where we have pharmaceutical companies producing APIs here. So this kind of, it's a lot of work to make our country, our system resilient to these kind of possible shocks in the future.
So I have a question regarding this line.
Oh yes.
Why do we have to wait for a serious crisis to open the policy window? You made a mention of Dr. Narendra Damodar's.
Yes, yes,
So
yes.
we have to wait for his assassination to pass the Anti-Superstition Act. So are we too bogged down by other assignments, let's say bureaucrats and politicians, or is population the issue we cannot manage?
No, so here what has happened is that in public policies, experts have studied all these phenomena across the globe. So I think there is Leslie Pal and John Kingdon, their study is very important in this. They have done extensive study on this whole notion of policy window. And they say that policies gather momentum and pass during those windows. And they have identified what constitutes these windows. So one is election. When there is a election and change of government, a new government comes with some fresh ideas, something like that, and then policy makers, people like us, think tanks, and basically talkative people on policy like us get a chance. So we tell them there is something new you can do like this. So election provides a chance. Then it is well acknowledged by these policy academicians that a crisis is a policy window. Any crisis, whether it's a financial crisis, something like 9/11, or this Dabolkar case that I mentioned, or anything like that, a crisis is a policy window. And then what they say is, after studying so many policies that got made in these windows, what they suggest is that be on the lookout. If you are advocating a policy, suppose you work in some field and you want a certain policy to be passed or adopted, you have all the material ready, you are a person who has studied these things, but no matter what you do, how many times you convince, this may not happen. Be on the lookout for that window and keep your antennas open. Once the window opens, push it through. So it's a recognized concept. So what I thought was, while we were working there, that COVID was a major sort of event, a pandemic. So it did provide a policy window to set right lot of things, particularly in the field of healthcare. And I thought, because I have been in so many deliberations during that period, at the bureaucratic level, at the level of cabinet, at the level of government of India, everywhere while solving the problem, there was a felt recognition that these things need to be set right. And we will do it once we are done with this. Once we are sorted out with this crisis, we will do it. That was the whole talk at that time. And I get a sense that probably after we sort of got over COVID because of vaccines and other things, and probably because COVID was such a bad memory for everybody, that nobody wants to talk about it anymore now. I sit with government people and it's like a forgotten chapter. It's a bad sort of bad dream that you don't want to revisit, and probably for that reason that policy window has not materialized. That's what it's my opinion. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. That was a really enlightening question answer session. But before we conclude with today's session, I now request Professor Deepak Shah, sir, to felicitate our speaker of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I now call upon Nivedita to propose the formal vote.
Good evening, everyone. As we come close to this remarkable session, ending of this remarkable session, I am Nivedita Kunte. I am a student of MSc Economics, specializing in public policy. I would like to thank Mr. Sitaram sir for gracing us all with his presence and sharing his enriching insights. I want to express our deepest appreciation to Mr. Kunte sir for sharing his wisdom, his personal experience, and his extensive knowledge on the supply chain management of COVID-19 and oxygen supply. I would also like to thank Dr. Deepak Shah sir, and I would also like to thank Dr. Patnaik sir for organizing this insightful event for us all. I would like to thank the non-teaching staff and the organizing team who work tirelessly behind the scenes to ensure smooth functioning and execution of this event. Their dedication and hard work has resulted for the possibility and the success of this event. I would also like to thank and acknowledge our audience. Thank you for your contribution and your questions. Your engagement in this discussion was a testament that this topic is of utmost importance. Again, I would like to thank you all for your presence, and we would like to have such enriching discussions in the future.